With the Prime card recently happening and of course the upcoming Misfits 11 event, I thought I'd revisit an old video I did a couple months back and update my ranking on the Misfits Boxing events. If you're new here, a couple months back I made a video where I ranked every single Misfits Boxing event from Misfits 01 to 05 since those were the events that happened by the time I made that video. There has been 5 more events that has happened since then, and of course the Prime card technically being Misfits 10. So I decided to rank those as well, cause why not? And I will also be giving my exclusive thoughts on the Prime card as well in this video, so be sure to stick around. But if you haven't seen my original ranking for the first 5 Misfits events, you should definitely check that out as well, cause some things might change in this video. My opinions tend to change over time, and you'll probably notice some changes with my list in this video. Also, before we get into it, if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe, and of course hit the bell to never miss out on new videos. Anyways, with all that being said, let's get into the ranking of these 10 Misfits events. At number 10, well, we're coming in hot. We got Misfits 06. Now, what do I think about Misfits 06? Well, around the time this event was going to happen, Misfits 07 KSI vs Fournier got announced a few weeks before, so people didn't really care about this event that much and were more hyped for the other event. This event would be headlined with JMX vs Le'Veon Bell as the main event. Some other fighters would appear on this card like Waleed Sharks, Chase Demore, Minicon, and so on. Around the time this event was happening, the Kingpin quarterfinals were happening, as well as Gervonta Davis vs Ryan Garcia, which a lot of people were more excited to see that weekend. The event took place on a Friday, the day before the Kingpin quarterfinals and of course the Tank fight. Either way, this event was definitely the weakest out of the other 9 events. The only good fights on this card were the Waleed Sharks vs A-Pop fight with Waleed getting a knockout in the second round, Minicon and Jake from Mr. Beast having a war, the Uncle Pizza vs Yeti Gang fight was pretty solid, and an honorable mention, the OJ Rose vs Kimbo Slice Jr. fight was also pretty good. The main event was low-key a mismatch in my opinion, and JMX of course ended up losing, but he was still able to survive the whole fight despite getting dominated by Le'Veon Bell, who was definitely one of the most skilled in the scene considering he was a former athlete. Also, I have to mention Chase Demore's controversial disqualification that happened during the prelims. Basically, he knocked down his opponent and continued punching him while he was on the floor, which resulted in Chase losing by disqualification. I mean, to be fair, that was probably the funniest part of the event, and Chase is definitely one of the more entertaining fighters on Misfits. But yeah, this event, while having its good moments, it's kinda just there and low-key forgettable, so I'm just gonna have to put it at the top of this list. At number 9, we got Misfits 08. A little better than the last card, but also an underwhelming show. I really like the promotion for this event with the Misfits Manor House series with B-Day, Nick Lamau, Swarms, and Ryan Johnston all staying in a house together and getting into shenanigans before fighting each other. Obviously, the hot dog incident with Modine supposedly getting pork or beef hot dogs thrown at him by Alex Stein. I mean, they ended up just being regular turkey hot dogs, but the fight still got cancelled, and this was a prelim fight I was actually somewhat excited for. Yeah, the fight got cancelled due to hot dogs. It was definitely a tough day for us in the hot dog community. Anthony Taylor vs Paul Bomba was supposed to happen, but Paul pulled out for no good reason really. I can't really remember why he did. The card was kind of overhyped as the best Misfits non-pay-per-view card, but didn't quite live up to that expectation. However, there were some good things that happened on this card. We had another tag team, but this time as the co-main event. Dean the Great and a mystery opponent who revealed to be Waleed Sharks will be facing against Yeti Gang and A-Pop. Obviously, Dean and Waleed being arch rivals while fighting on a tag team was difficult as they still had that animosity towards each other and of course wanted that rematch. Hasim Rahman would pull out of fighting Alan Belcher and the GOAT Chase Demore would step in on a few days' notice to take on Alan Belcher. Chase would survive all the rounds with Alan, but of course Alan won as him being a pro and I guess the more experienced fighter, and Chase was just pretty much there to survive and not really had any intention to win, but fair play to Chase either way. The 4-man Survivor tag was crazy with Nick Lamau coming out with the win after knocking down Ryan Johnston. It was a pretty decent main event despite it being Survivor tag. I think for the main card there ended up only being like 4 fights with of course 2 Happy Punch prelims. Definitely one of the shortest Misfits events, and it was also kind of an underwhelming show. Overall it was a little better than 06 but still a little weaker compared to the other cards. At number 8 we got Misfits 02. So yeah, now we're back at Misfits 02 and this was one of the early Misfits cards. Most of this will be a repeat of what I said in my previous ranking video. Obviously we had Jay Swingler vs Churdleys as the main event, and quite the mismatch in my opinion. Slim vs Ryan Taylor was a co-main on this card, and that was one really good fight with Slim dominating and getting his get back on Ryan. Astrid Wet, everyone's favorite female influencer boxer, would make her debut on this card fighting Keely, and of course stopping her within the first round. Anthony Taylor's infamous 2-second knockdown on Ashley Raksu, JMX would be making his return after 4 years, facing Jin T as a warm-up fight. There were a lot of pullouts as well, and this was when Misfits would start having more pullouts prominent in their future events. I mean, to be fair, this was after the amazing Misfits 01 event, and J being the main event of this card, the stakes weren't as high in my opinion. Overall, an okay card, but definitely a card I wouldn't really go back to as often, but at least this card still felt more like classic influencer boxing low-key, rather than the previous two events I mentioned. Number 7, we got Misfits 05. Another Swingler main event, and a better one at least. He would be facing Nick Lamau, who was making his debut at the time. This card would be the introduction of the tag teams, and Pineda and B-Dave, Los Pineda Colados, would tag up to fight Ice Poseidon and Anthony Vargas as D-Generation Ice. King Kenny would make an appearance on this card fighting Ashley Raksu, ended up losing because he barely threw any punches and solely relied only on his defense. Dean the Great would come back after a great fight against Waleed in Misfits 03, fighting Puli Arif and of course winning that. Waleed was also going to be fighting on this card, but his opponents kept pulling out, so his fight got cancelled until he would fight on Misfits 06. The event was fine, I guess. Nick Lamau at least gave Jake somewhat of a competitive fight, and many people believe Nick easily won that fight and got robbed. But either way, it was a very close fight, but also a great introduction for Nick in the scene. The tag team match was also pretty cool, with B-Dave knocking out Ice Poseidon, and Los Pineda Colados would win that bout by TKO. Astrid would also be fighting on this card against AJ Bunker, but I guess most of y'all could really care less. But overall, this event was better than the previous Swingler card. This card would be the introduction of the tag teams as well as Nick Lamau putting up a great fight with Jay Swingler, so I'll just have to put it at number 7 just because of all that. At number 6, we got Misfits 07. Now, why is a KSI event this high up on this list? Well, if I'm being honest, this was definitely the weakest KSI Misfits event, but also had some gems. Obviously, KSI vs Joe Fournier was the main event. Deji would be making his return after fighting Floyd Mayweather and facing against a much tougher challenge in the almighty Swarms. Salt Papi would be facing against Anthony Taylor as his very first test after having 3 great wins. This event would also be the introduction of the Happy Punch prelims. Boogie 298 would make his boxing debut against Wings of Redemption as the main event of the prelims. The fight was even regarded as the heaviest fight in boxing history too. I mean, this event was alright, but wasn't as electric as the other KSI cards. Joe Fournier was hyped up to be this dangerous professional boxer that'll put up a fight with JJ and be his biggest test since the Logan fight. However, the fight between KSI and Fournier only ended up going 2 rounds. Fournier ended up looking worse and not adapting to JJ's style. The fight would end with JJ landing an elbow, thought to be a clean knockout on Fournier, and essentially stopping the fight. However, the fight would later get overturned as a no contest as the elbow wasn't a legal shot, as well as JJ didn't really do it on purpose, so it wasn't necessarily a straight disqualification. Despite the elbow, JJ was pretty much dominating Joe, so even without the elbow, the result would have quite been the same with JJ winning. Deji would fight on this card against Swarms. Honestly expected him to get a knockout, but the fight ended up going the distance with Deji winning by decision. Deji definitely performed well, but he still could have done a little better, and hopefully we can see that whenever he fights next. Salt Papi vs Anthony Taylor was also another big fight happening on this card. Salt was the favorite to win and Anthony was pretty much the underdog. The fight was only 3 rounds and ended up going the full distance with AT getting the win and somewhat exposing Salt Papi. Probably one of the biggest upsets on this card. But yeah, overall this event wasn't bad, but just didn't have the same feel as the first 2 KSI Misfits events. Overall, still a decent Misfits card in general. At number 5, we got Misfits 09. Now I'm gonna be honest, when this event was happening, I wasn't able to watch it all the way through. I had some other stuff to do that day while the event was going on. It was like the afternoon in the East Coast of the United States when the fights were happening. This event was essentially a filler card before the big prime card that would be happening a few weeks after. Idris Virgo would headline the show and he would be facing against Aaron Chambers. FaZe Temper would make his return on this card fighting Jinty. Others would be fighting like Ashley Raksu, Halal Ham, and so on. During this event, a lot of the prime card fights were exclusively getting announced. One fight that got announced during the event was the Slim vs Salt Papi fight. Slim and Salt faced off in the ring and I guess signed a prop contract in front of the whole arena. This truly felt like a WWE moment. But yeah, this was definitely a big highlight of the event. There was also a lot of great fights for a non-pay-per-view card. Again, didn't really watch it because I had stuff going on, but I watched some fights like the Arms vs Master Uguay fight with Arms stopping Uguay in the first round itself. Ashley Raksu versus Halal Ham with Ashley getting a unanimous decision win. I also watched the Temper vs Jinty fight with Temper stopping Jinty with a TKO in the first round and getting his redemption after his loss against KSI. In the main event, Idris Virgo vs Aaron Chambers with Idris stopping Aaron by TKO in the third round. Overall, it was a great event for a non-pay-per-view and a good card to build up the big and exciting Misfits Prime card, so that's why I'm putting it at number 5. Number 4, we got Misfits 03. A legendary Misfits card having the very first Dean vs Waleed fight as the main event, and it was a very good fight in general. Face Temper getting his knockout victory over Overflow within the first round, Hasim Rahman vs Greg Hardy, man, the list goes on. This card definitely had more of that excitement, and this would mark the first Misfits event in the USA taking place in Austin, Texas. Definitely was an electric card despite being a free event. During the event, they would also announce KSI's next opponent for the Misfits 04 show, which would be Dylan Dennis. Well, until he pulled out, of course. But their face-off was definitely a highlight of the event and felt very WWE-esque. Definitely a banger card and a legendary one to say the least. Now this one might be a little controversial, but number 3 we have to go with the Prime card. Okay, let me explain myself first. Listen, it was definitely a very hyped up event with KSI facing Tommy Fury and also Logan Paul making his return and fighting Dylan Dennis in the co-main event. This was also a very stacked card since the first Misfits event. We even had some main event worthy fights on the undercard. Fights like Slim vs Salt Poppy, Dean vs Waleed 2, King Kenny vs Anthony Taylor, etc. However, as hyped as the event was, I'll say there were some things that went wrong on fight night. There were a lot of robberies on this card. Chase got robbed of his win from Tempo. Astrid vs Alexia was meant to be a draw, but Astrid got the win. I think there were some robberies from the tag team match that are also getting appealed as I'm recording this video. Of course, PBA recently just declined most of those appeals, so... And of course, for the main event, KSI getting robbed of his win against Tommy Fury. Also, the Logan Paul vs Dylan Dennis fight was probably the worst fight on this card. It was the most hyped up fight and was the people's main event, but ended up being arguably the most embarrassing boxing fight ever, with Dylan barely throwing any punches and guarding, whilst Logan couldn't even knock down Dylan, and just had to win by disqualification after what happened towards the end of the fight. Both the main events were pretty much a letdown. However, most of the undercard fights were a lot better than the main events itself. Obviously, Slim getting a knockout on Salt Poppy and proving himself to all the haters, and the Dean vs Waleed 2 fight also being as entertaining as the first, but this time Dean was dominating the fight and of course won by decision. The AT vs Kenny fight was one of the most boring fights on the card, with AT just winning by hugging, like what he did with Salt Poppy. It was a frustrating fight to watch. Now, despite all the lows, the highs on this card are definitely very high, but also more letdowns than expected. And I gotta mention the main event, KSI vs Tommy, with Tommy winning by unanimous decision in a very close fight. Supposedly, many thought KSI won and got robbed. As I'm recording this video, KSI has sent an appeal to the PBA to overturn the decision, so we'll just have to ultimately wait on that. Overall, probably not the greatest card as we expected, but this was definitely a very stacked card, and I'm still excited to see every single fight. And the promotion for this event was far by the best out of all the other Misfits events, so that's why I'm just gonna have to put it at number 3. At number 2, we got Misfits 04. Now, in my previous video, I know I put Misfits 04 at number 1, but now my mind has quite changed a bit. 04 is still one of the best Misfits events, and arguably even better than the Prime card. It was an exciting event with KSI being announced to fight Dylan Dennis, an MMA guy that's been talking shit to KSI, Logan, and Jake Paul these past few years. This was actually supposed to originally be the Prime card, as Logan would have been fighting Dylan on this card instead. JJ was supposed to fight Woodley, but I guess there were some issues there, and Logan had his injury from WWE, which caused him to get pulled out of this event. The only best option for JJ was to fight Dylan Dennis, as he also had back and forth with JJ as well. This card also had some great fights on the undercard, from Elle Brook vs Faith Ordway, Storms vs Ryan Taylor, Salt Poppy vs Josh Bruckner, etc. Also, there was a mystery opponent that was fighting B-Dave, and Pineda, of course, revealed to be the opponent. Was probably the best ring walk of that event in my opinion. However, Dylan would pull out a few weeks before the fight, and Face Temper would step in as a replacement to fight KSI, as JJ was already training for a southpaw, so it didn't make sense for him to fight an orthodox fighter. KSI would end up knocking out Temper within the first round using his new karate style stance. Slim, who also KO'd Face Temper in the first event, would face against Tom Zanetti in this event as well. Slim ended up winning by unanimous decision and still remained undefeated. Salt Poppy had one of the best performances against Josh Bruckner, with Poppy knocking out Bruckner clean in the second round and showing his levels. Swarms hit Ryan with one punch that caused Ryan to get his retina torn, in which the fight would get stopped. Definitely was a crazy night of fights, and one of the best Misfits events to date. Still at the top of this list even to this day. And at number 1, of course, we got the very first Misfits 01 card. And I know I put this at number 2 over Misfits 04 in the last video. Sometimes I like either events better as they were both just such great shows. However, 01 definitely felt more like OG YouTube boxing, and it was even more exciting as KSI JJ would be making his return to the ring after 3 years of not fighting. It was cool to see JJ fighting 2 people in one night, but probably not the highest level, or at least around his level. Alex Wasabi was originally supposed to fight JJ as they had their back and forths for a couple of years. However, Alex had to pull out due to a concussion, which would then initiate the 2 fights in one night against Swarms and Pineda. Despite the main events not being all that great, the undercard was electric. Dean the Great would make his debut and of course beat Evil Hero. Soul Poppy had one of the quickest knockouts in the YouTube scene at the time against Andy Worski. Sam Hyde vs. I Am Thompson was a lot of fun. It was nice to see Sensei return to the ring and fight King Kenny. Despite the result, it was a very close fight, but I still feel like Sensei got robbed. Deji getting his first win against Fuzi and the performance he put up was amazing. Then Slim coming in on 2 weeks notice to fight Face Temper and then knocking him out cold after being the underdog. This event is definitely god tier amongst all the other Misfits events. Just the feel of watching it had me on the edge of my seat. And especially since it's his return either way, people still wanted to see him fight again and of course fight Jake Paul in the near future. This event revolutionized YouTube boxing as we know it, with even Misfits involving some pros and more new people to the scene. Misfits in general definitely saved crossover influencer boxing, as they have had 9 more events in the next year compared to other YouTube boxing promotions. One of the best cards to date, and not even the Prime card could have topped it. Definitely the best Misfits event in my opinion. Well, that's my updated ranking of the Misfits events. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you guys want me to make this into a series where I do this for every other 5 events. I mean, the only reason I did this list again was because of the Prime card that recently happened, and I wanted to get my overall thoughts on it. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to never miss out on a new video. Also, sorry for the lack of uploads recently. I've been taking a little break, but I'm back and working on some new video ideas that you'll probably be seeing very soon. Also got some other projects I'm working on currently, so please do bear with me. Also, check out some of the other stuff the channel has to offer. I want to kind of change up my content and spice things up, so hopefully you guys will stay tuned. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I am Mega Shadow, signing out. Peace.